Hey everyone, welcome to episode 4 of the Jon Kragh Show. Today we have Brian Iglesias, a Marine veteran, currently the director of marketing operations at ESPN, and actually my old lifting partner. Today, anybody who's watched this show before, we're focused on things that are going to outlive ourselves, things that create long-term value. Brian has created a masterpiece around the Chosin battle that we're going to talk about today. Brian, I just want to give you a chance to introduce yourself to everyone and a little bit about your background, and then we'll go into what makes Chosin such a legendary battle for the United States.
Sure. Well, it's super happy to see you. It's been forever. Yeah. So we used to jack steel back in the day and play a little football together. Since then I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school, ended up going to an officer program, got my film degree at Temple, became an infantry officer, went to combat a couple times, got married, had kids, and then decided to get off active duty to pursue my passion of the media and entertainment industry. And I started with the Chosin documentary. It's about the Chosin Reservoir campaign of the Korean War. And being a Marine, your history, the legacy that came before you is really part of who you are. The Marines are very in touch with their culture. And all the Marines that came before them. So it's very, very important. And Chosin is one of those iconic battles in our history. We talk about it at boot camp, whether it was enlisted boot camp, officer boot camp, and the odds outnumbered, sub-zero temperatures, outnumbered 13-1, if not more. And they had to fight their way to freedom while saving civilians along the way. It's just an amazing, epic story that hasn't really been told. And when it came time to decide, what project are we going to work on, it was the easiest choice just because it was so important to, me and us as Marines, and it just hasn't been told.
Amazing. I'm going to jump into and show a quick, for the audience, we have prepared here the actual video, the trailer for the movie, if anybody hasn't seen it. So let me pull that up and pull the video up here, the trailer. Let's take a quick peek.
Freedom has a price. It's not free. You have to fight for this freedom.
North Korea invaded South Korea on the 25th of June. We didn't have ammunition. Some of us didn't have weapons. Our platoons and our companies were under strength.
I had 2 summer camps, but no boot camp at all. I had no idea what I was getting into.
Naturally, you never felt like you were coming back. You thought you were a dead man.
And here came the biggest mass of men I ever saw in my life. And they were armed with everything. And I literally, to this day, think the earth was shaking. I mean, it's just like a stampede of buffalo coming around the corner.
And it was the Chinese. And we were shooting as fast as we could. I'm not just me, all of us were shooting. And the machine guns were shooting, and the mortars were shooting, and the aircraft were coming in at that time. It was carnage in the valley.
You'd kill 100, another 100 would come up. They just would make mass attacks come right into our machine gun fire. And I remember in a 5-minute span, they had bodies piled 10 feet high.
We fought so hard we ran out of ammunition. By that time, quite a few of our guys were dead. I took anything I could get, any dead Marine, any Chinaman, use them as a perimeter around my foxhole.
When I got to Hellfire Valley on the way out, walking out, you could almost cry seeing those Marines laying there.
I had what we call the Serviceman's Testament given out by the Gideons. I had that with me, and I just opened it up, and I read the 4th verse. Yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I'll fear no evil. Thou art with me. I prayed for the first time in my life. I didn't know where God was. Where's God? So I looked up. I said, God, don't let me die. Not here. I just want to see the sun come up one more day. Just give me another day.
Just insane.
I haven't seen that in a while. And two emotions hit me watching that. One, it's, even though I've made the movie, seen the movie a million times, seen the trailer a million times, it still kind of hits me in the feels. And I miss those guys. I spent a lot of time with them in person, but then just watching them over and over in the edit, and just, because I did everything soup to nuts on this film with me and a few buddies, and it was just,
It comes through so much how much those guys opened up for you, because when I prepared for this interview, I did as much deep dive as I could into the conflict. And you go through materials and they're all mostly about the tactics or the strategy. This documentary was really about the individuals, and that was really something that was special about this. So what was it about these Marines and the rapport that you guys had with them that helped them open up and feel comfortable to really memorialize this epic story?
Sure. So there's a couple things here. The first is, you're right, a lot of documentaries are facts. It's event driven, and I'm a combat vet, and so was my buddy that was Anton Sattler, that was my partner on the film. And we sort of lived through it. Not as nearly as bad or as hard as what these guys went through, but we've been there, right? And I don't remember it as facts and figures when I recall my time in combat. And so we wanted to sort of tell that same story. That's why if you watch the documentary, you're not going to see names and units and lots of dates. You're not going to see lots and lots of maps, because it's a human story. It's even on the Chinese side, no matter what, being a person at war and it's the same emotional journey. It's harrowing. And that's really what we tried to get across, right? So we purposefully approached it that way. And for those guys to open up to us, it was clear that the combat vet thing. So we were reaching out, and people said no to us at first. And we finally got someone to say yes. There's a group called the Chosen Few. It's a survivors organization. They call it a last man organization because it's just them. So once the last chosen veteran dies, they turn off the lights. That's it. It's over. And we started with some veterans. We met with them. We talked to them. We did the videos. And then they sort of vouched for us. And we sort of leapfrogged our way across the country. I think we interviewed about 218 of them in total.
Wow.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time on the road. And the main reason why they opened up to us, because most of them were Marines. There were a few Army guys that we interviewed, and we were combat vets. And I can tell you, quite often they said this is the first time they've talked about it or told these certain stories. They didn't even tell their families or their kids. And so it was an honor for them to tell that to us. But you can also see a great unburdening for them. And I also do think that age has something to do with it. As you get older, and I've learned this from them, and I'm probably going to experience it myself. When you get out of the service, you've been to combat, you've done these things, you're getting married, you're having kids, you have a job, you're busy. You have a lot of distractions. You don't have time to sit within your memories and these things. And as they retired, as they got older, they have nothing but time. They have nothing but reflection and memories. And that's when all of these things came up. And you'll even see in the VA, you'll see a lot of guys and gals getting PTSD treatment later in life, because that's when it's bubbling up, when there's no more distractions. And I think it was time for them. I think it was a perfect coincidence that we were there at that time and they were ready to tell their story, and we're just beyond fortunate.
And there's so much to unpack from that. I remember at the end of the documentary that there was, and I just rewatched it again for, I think, the third time this week. And the tail end of the story about how there was a few guys that said they hadn't talked about it. There was one guy that said he was part of a local business group, I believe, and was asked to talk about his service. Right. And he said, I hadn't thought it hit me, but then when I started to really go through it, it really started to unburden me from some things that I didn't even know I was burdened from, more or less. Another part of it that it was, since I think you guys just did an amazing job about making it about the individuals, is something that was just crazy to me was almost this peace that they all had about it in some way. One guy said, I hold no hatred in my heart, or something along those lines. And if I saw one of the Chinese servicemen that fought in it, and he'd give him a hug. It's only like basically he would know the pain that everybody was going through. I'm such a wimp when it comes to the cold. Just the cold, let alone being at war in like massive cold. I could imagine. I can't imagine. But that whole segment there where there was this unburdening for them it seemed just so awesome that you guys were able to bring out. What was it like tactically for you guys in producing this film? You said logistically you 218 people. If you did an interview a day, you're almost up to a year. Were you on the road for a full year? Did you have a van? What was it like tactically to actually execute this?
So there's a lot to it. So I'll give you the actual filming piece. So we actually wrote a script. So it wasn't really a script, but it was a narrative structure as if it was a real movie. So first act, second act, third act, all the different narrative turns. And so we structured it, and we were fortunate because the story of the battle fits the narrative structure beautifully. So we knew what questions to ask the veterans. We knew what we needed of them. So we had it all framed up, and we would say, okay, we got the directory of the chosen few. And Anton did it, but we plotted their addresses on a map. And we were fundraising as we went. So we had a nonprofit sponsor. People could donate to them. They would take a small administration fee. So we would get the money. We had our equipment donated. We had all kinds of stuff donated to us. So we would say, okay, Austin, Texas, there's 30 chosen veterans in a 50-mile radius. So then we would contact them, set up like a weekend. And it was like, every 2 hours, a new veteran would come in, and we would do like 3 days nonstop. And we would fly out, set up. There was like, sometimes we'd, 3 guys would sleep in a van. Sometimes we'd all sleep in a hotel room. We didn't have a lot of money. And we would just set the lighting up. We would use a VFW or Marine Corps leak, so we get a location for free. The equipment was free. Like it was very guerrilla filmmaking. And then the guys would just cycle through. So the set was already lit. We didn't have to do new setups. Guys would cycle through. We would do that for 3 days, pack up and either go to the next spot or come home and plan for the next one. And during that time frame, we would contact local radio stations, local newspapers, internet news providers as a human interest story. So when they would cover it, more people were aware. It created greater local awareness, not just for these veterans, but for our project. And then we were able to get more donations and more in-kind services. So there was a filming and a PR campaign as we were sort of moving across the country.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you said you had this narrative structure from start to finish for that. When did you know you were done with the interviews? Was there a definitive, we're finished when we get the story complete? Or is it when you interviewed as many people as were willing to be interviewed? Like, what was the end?
That's a good question. 'Cause I don't even know. I think it was, we plotted all these areas and we said, okay, we have to go to all these cities. Like we just sort of plotted out. And I think it took 8 months of time to get the filming done and to do it. And then it took, I think, 15 months, if I'm not mistaken, from the very start. So from the very beginning of us planning to do it to us actually releasing the film, it was 15 months, which is quite remarkably short. Period of time. That includes planning, writing, filming, and editing it. And we just edited on a MacBook in my spare bedroom or in my dining room.
What was the year? Because the MacBook at that time was probably not, we're in 2022 right now. So the MacBooks back then were decent probably, but
yeah, it was. So I pitched Anton on the idea in January of 2009. And I'm going to say we started filming a couple months later.
Okay.
And that was it.
And what was the response to the film? From veterans, from the Marines that participated in it, the public, the general public? What was the response?
So we actually showed it to the veterans before we even released it. So we got their feedback. We got their blessing. We made sure that we told it as honestly and truthfully as possible. We explained our approach. Because some guys would ask, where's my name? Where's this? But we sort of, and there was no pushback. I think they all understood that it was just a human story. It could have been anybody. It could have been any person who was at Chosin, Army, Navy, Marine, etc. That was their story, in essence, right? It belonged to everybody. And they were good with it. And so they had a warm response. Then we were on Netflix. So we were like a top 25 documentary for quite some time when we were on pay TV. So we were on Epic. So we got some distribution deals. We put it out there. The DVD sales were fantastic. That was when people were still buying. It was the tail end when people were still buying DVDs. And it was remarkable. But I think the greatest feedback was really from the other veterans and chosen veterans, even like, let's say Vietnam veterans, because they were trained by these Korean War veterans, right? So these guys trained the Vietnam vets. And so, and you don't always tell stories even to other veterans. You just don't, I don't talk about it. I don't. And for them to hear like, oh, wow, these were my guys. They call them their seniors. These were my seniors. These guys trained me. And all the veterans in between, they just loved it. And even family members. I remember, I had a, I forgot, it was a woman. I think it was a woman. And she said, her, maybe it was a family member. It was a family saying their dad was at Chosin and he struggled his whole life and he died and he never talked with them. And even though he was gone, them watching the film, they literally said they now feel closer to their dad
That's insane.
They ever had, and I remember a mother in New Jersey, we screened it here at the Vietnam Memorial down by the PNC off exit 116. A mom said, my son's been to Afghanistan a couple times and he's struggling. And she saw the video and she's like, I have a better understanding of what my son's going through by watching this movie. So there's a history standpoint, there's a family standpoint, a veteran standpoint, and they showed at Bridgeport, they like our cold weather training. They still showed around the Marine Corps. We did screenings on bases, and it's just, we're just so happy that we could tell their story.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about it that I think is not as obvious probably at the point in time that you're making it is this thing is going to live, well beyond both of us, right? So it's going to live 200-300 years. It's up in the cloud now. You can get it on Amazon Prime Video. You can purchase the movie, and it's going to be, you've memorialized those veterans and the story and everything else. And as tensions are continuing to escalate right now, currently in the world, some of these stories may become extremely relevant. Once again, people may reflect back on them to, learn from history on what exactly happened during those times, because there's similar tensions even today than what seems to have been occurring at that time during that conflict. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's going to live for so long.
It's funny that you said that, because since you reached out to me, you talked about this, I'm now thinking, wow, I have to transfer the rights to my kids. Like I have to now think about passing it forward to my children. But, this is such an iconic battle for Marines. Every Marine's taught and will always be taught for the rest of the existence of the Marine Corps. This battle will always be taught. And there are new Marines graduating every Friday. So the audience grows every Friday, just like Finding Nemo. There are kids born every day. There is a new audience being generated every single day across the world for all of these iconic Disney movies. It's the same idea. As new Marines are built, there's new audience. There's people who are going to care about it.
Yeah. One of the things that you guys did that you should be ridiculously proud of is, if I go back to the film, the lighting in here, it's now what, 13 years later from when you actually shot the footage. The footage does not look dated. It looks, I think when we did the pre-interview, you said it looks like it's supposed to look. When I look at things like that are timeless, like The Sopranos, for example, and look at the lighting in The Sopranos, there was a character that was about it. There's something that's really special about the lighting, the presentation, the music, everything in here. It's just, it hits you. The really interesting thing is that, like a great painting, it doesn't feel dated. Tell us a little bit about what went into the lighting and what was intentional. What did you do to give it this feel?
So I appreciate that, because it meant a lot. So when I was in school, my focus in film school was being a cinematographer. So lighting and camera and lenses. And so I lit this, right? And I had my buddy Sug, but I lit it. And like I said, it looks the way it was supposed to. Sometimes people nowadays, they have such high-end cameras, they just film it, make sure they capture the image, and they can sort of adjust it in the editing phase to make it look more dramatic and lighting. We didn't really have that luxury. So we lit it just like you were lighting a film. You don't have a lot of leeway in film. So we had a spot meter. So I was literally checking how much light was hitting certain areas, which part of their face was, warmer or had more light than the other. The background, you could see the backlight on the back of his jacket. So we put a lot of effort in. It was a cheap 3 or 4 light kit that we got from we got on loan from a school, and a lot of tinfoil, cardboard to block out certain areas. You could see the background on purpose is darker. We would arrange the background with whatever we can find, and it was very, very important that we just lit it correctly, because it's a very simple documentary. It's just talking heads and B-roll. There's no action, there's no camera movement, there's nothing sexy about it. So you had to make sure that it looked great and it sounded great. And we did use 2 cameras. We just stacked them. One camera was for a close-up and one camera was for a wider shot, right? The idea was that as we would go through it, if they made a mistake or there was something going on, we could cut between the wide shot and the close-up as they were talking to give it some extra dimension, some extra movement. So that was an important part of it. And it's interesting to note, this was a 720p camera. So we're all into 4K. This is 720. So this isn't even 1080. You can't even buy a TV that's 720 nowadays. It doesn't exist. The technology is over, it's old, but it still like you said, it looks pristine. It looks clean. It kind of looks almost like we did shoot it in film. And I think that's primarily because we lit it like it was a film. We shot it properly. And another technical note is, as the story goes on, and it's the journey, right? You're a young kid, you just want to have fun and live your life, and you join the military because you think it's cool, or you want your dad did it or something. And as they go on, they end up in battle. There's freezing temperatures. There's death, and fear and anger and sadness, and there's all these things. And so the film starts off very warm. You probably won't notice it, but the film starts off warm. And as the story goes on, as they get to the freezing temperatures that you'll see where they're moving piles of bodies, we actually change the color temperature to get colder. So as the story goes on, the color becomes less and less warm and much colder. That not only reflects the environment they were in, but it also reflects the emotion and the human journey, because that's, it does something to you, right? And then it doesn't warm up until they're back home. Then it kind of comes back up to slowly get warmer as they're sort of back home and reflecting on their life post-war. So
yeah, that attention to detail is crazy. And in today's world, we see all of these talking head videos online, everything else, and there's nothing particularly grasping about them, but there's just something about the way that this comes across, with the lighting mixed with the words, of course. Like everything is about the story, but you just get pulled in, right? This is serious with it. It's not, and it's a mixture of the words and the production that goes into it. So it's just phenomenal. So you go through all this, you put the movie out, and then there's, I would say, additional things that you've produced that also go along with this story. So there's another animation on YouTube that has 2.4 million views. Tell us a little bit about where that started. That was produced, of course, after this video, but tell us a little bit about the animation as well, because that has just so many comments and seems to have hit people right in the gut.
Yeah, so during this process, we really wanted to make a feature film or like a Band of Brothers type movie, and we were pushing towards that. But I met a guy named Jeff Gomez, and he's sort of like an iconic figure in the world of transmedia. Essentially, it's like creating a story universe that expands multiple touch points, just like Star Wars, right? Movies, TV shows, animated video games, books, comics. The Star Wars story universe is infinite. And the idea is, how do we make this chosen story into its own universe? How do we expand it to tell the story in multiple touch points? Some people might not want to watch a documentary. It might not be attractive to them. So we did a Kickstarter. We were trying to do a 3D animated short, very, very hard to do, very, very expensive, very complicated. And so we ended up going with like a mix of like a 2D kind of type animation. And we really wanted to tell just a different angle of the story. So we've done comic books and we've done the animation. The animation piece really touches on the dual humanity. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but you talked about it where there's one scared kid on one side of a rifle. There's another scared kid on the other side of the rifle. So if you watch it, you see it goes through the Chosin story. It talks through what happened. There was a surprise attack. They didn't expect it. They're being overwhelmed by hundreds, if not thousands, of people charging at their posts, and they have to fight them off. And when you see the enemy, at first they're like a monster. You almost subconsciously dehumanize them, or it's terrifying. It's absolutely frightening. And so you'll see them being portrayed as monsters, but in the midpoint of the piece, you'll see a moment where a bomb explodes and it flashes and they're face to face and they're just two kids. They're not monsters. It's nothing like that. They're just two scared kids essentially kind of fighting someone else's war. It's really not their war, right? They're just the tools of it. And that was really important to get that across. And we learned that from the Chosin vets as they talked about it in there. And so we wanted to express that in the animated piece.
That's really interesting as far as I've gone through this content so much in the last 2 weeks. And I remember even after not watching this content for 7-8 years, the original documentary, I had always remembered the veteran that said, if I saw a Chinaman that fought in that war, I'd hug him. I hold no animosity or anything like that. And that moment always stuck with me. And then I see the animation on YouTube, and there's comments with thousands and thousands of likes on them that are all about that pivotal moment. And that is, also, you could see that as being almost a controversial view coming from someone who's been in service, right? That's to put that human individual aspect that, I could imagine that might even get some pushback to humanize the dehumanized aspect of it. So did you get any pushback on that part of the animation, or was it all it's just a natural reality that everyone kind of accepts? It's a bunch of kids in wars fighting, doing what they're told.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I've gotten it both ways. You'll see comments that say we're being evil and dehumanizing and turning the Chinese into monsters.
Ah, yes,
right.
I did see that in a minute too. Yes,
right. And so you'll see both ways, and there's not a lot of pushback saying that of the dehumanization per se. I don't think maybe some people just missed it, but I think as people would re-comment and commented, I think there's real dialogue in those comments, and I think that's the really important part. Where people didn't just give you a thumbs up; they were you could see there's talking back and forth and almost arguing back and forth about what it meant. And for me, it was. I'm glad they're doing it. It was our vision. We worked with Hopper Studios and to put it together. And there's a lot of people that went into that project. Max Uriarte, my buddy Richard Myers. It was even Anton was with me, and we lived it. Now, do I feel that way? It's still a little new to me. I mean, the last time I was in combat was 2004, which is 18 years ago. It almost seems like it never happened, and sometimes it seems like it was yesterday. But I do understand that it was just somebody else thinking that they were doing the right thing. I was doing what I thought was the right thing. And when you get these large global conflicts and when there's nations and governments involved, it wasn't my idea to go to war. It wasn't my boss's idea to go to. It wasn't this other guy's idea or his. And we're just doing what we're told and what our country makes us do. And I think. Like you talked about how it's relevant today, I think it's for anybody who's ever going to be in a position of power anywhere in the world. The idea is these are people, these are humans, and we're going to have them essentially take each other's lives. And for what? For what? And so it better be a good reason.
It better be. Yeah. And that's, I think about that too, when I've taken the afternoon off to shoot this interview, and I'm an American entrepreneur. I've been self-employed for 17 years. And I think a lot of these things are worth it, right? I think one of the Marines in there said, freedom isn't free. And it's never been more apparent than today, and what's going on in the Ukraine and everything else right now. I work in software, and I know some development teams in the Ukraine, and they're trying to get their work done. They also have weapons that have been supplied to them if they need to protect themselves. I have friends in Kyiv, right? So freedom isn't free, and there are good times that things need to be done. There are bad actors in the world. The first thing I was going to save it to the end, but I want to make sure that I express my sincerest gratitude for your service, and also for everyone that fought in the war that we're talking about, or I guess specifically the Korean War. But I want to actually ask you about that as I go into that. But thank everyone that's participated in it, that did the hard work. So in the context of the Korean War, how is the Battle of Chosin classified? So I saw that in the comic book, it was talked about as a police action. How does the actual technical classification work of Chosin? Is it a microcosm of the larger battle, or how does it technically fit into everything?
So Chosin was just a main part of the Korean War, and essentially we liberated South Korea, right? That was done, and then we decided to push forward, and that's when China got involved in mass, and that was really the pivotal moment. It's when it was really World War III. It was the first time. If I'm not mistaken, it was the first time the UN went to war, but they called it a police action. The UN is still relatively young. They called it a police action. So when these veterans would come home, it's almost like they couldn't even join the VFW because it wasn't a war. VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, not Veterans of Foreign Police Actions. So as I was told by the veterans, there were certain benefits or certain stigma that it wasn't a war. It was a police action. And that was the whole thing. So imagine, you're going to war. You did everything that everyone did in World War II and World War I and all the wars before that, but it was a police action because it was a UN thing, not just a United States thing, right? It was tough, and to hear them talk about how they felt coming back, and it was also different because at that point, the country mobilized for World War I and World War II. The country didn't mobilize for Korea. Sometimes they didn't even know what was going on. They were like, oh, wait, where have you been? They would say that a lot. They'd come home and they'd say, well, where you been? And they say, I was in Korea. Oh, Korea, where's that? And it's, they didn't have the news. They didn't have the internet. It was just something that was happening very, very far away.
Back to the individual aspect of this. Imagine coming home and like people not realizing that you even sacrificed as much as you did in coming home. I remember at the end of it, somebody saying that, I went to my old friends, but what was I going to talk to them about? So I went and called up buddies that were servicemen that were in other places. I think he said DC or something like that. That's awful, but also exemplifies why the work that you guys have done is so important, right? Like when you see a video on YouTube with the animation where you have those thousands of comments and people talking back and forth, that's people engaging about something that could have been easily forgotten, right? So it even makes it more important for the work that you guys have done and putting this together. And then, I don't want to call it I don't know if franchise is the right word, but this world that you're creating with the different avenues of distribution, reaching people where they want to hear about it. I mean, that's basically go to market for telling this story to, different personas that take it media in different ways. The YouTube stuff is phenomenal. Have you ever considered new distribution avenues now in 2022 for the documentary itself? I don't know how the rights work and everything like that. Have you considered revamping from DVD or from Amazon Prime to because to be clear for everyone, you can buy on Prime Video the documentary in full and stream it on your phone. It works, or on your TV or anything like that. But have you considered new avenues now? And because this whole world is flipped upside down in just 5 years on how video is distributed.
Yeah. So there's a couple things. So first, I want to go back to the earlier point, is that there is one group of people that did not forget. It's the Koreans. It's the South Koreans. And they are so appreciative for what we did for them. Again, these are people who never even heard of Korea, coming over to sacrifice their lives and give their lives en masse for their freedom. And, I remember going to Korea in the Marine Corps. I've been there a couple times to train there. And the Koreans were so kind and so generous and so welcoming. And I've actually gone to South Korea to show the film. in South Korea, and they have museums about the Korean War, and they really appreciate what all these veterans did for them. They actually, even the government flies Korean War veterans back to Korea at least one time in order to sort of, they have like a parade and like a memorial service, and like they treat them like royalty. And the government does that. You know, they maintain the U.S. cemeteries that are there. So even though those guys weren't really appreciated or even acknowledged so much at home, they call it the Forgotten War for a reason. In Korea, it's not forgotten, and it doesn't go unnoticed. So I just want to make that note.
That's the excellent point.
Yeah, it's important. Now, for other avenues, we were on Netflix, we were on pay TV. I would love to be on Netflix. They don't do the same. They don't buy films and acquire films and license them the same way. They just don't do it. I would give it to them for free. They don't have to give me a penny. I just want people to see it. The DVDs, we had DVDs, the DVD sales, we sold a lot for a while. After a while, they sort of tapered off, and the Amazon fees just to store the DVDs, to have them fulfill it, at a certain point, it was no longer break even, because their fees, their pick and pull fees, the fulfillment fees, all the Amazon fees started going up and up and up and up. Storage fees started going up, and I can't charge $40 for a DVD. People don't even buy DVDs anymore. I can't start increasing the price.
Right.
No one's going to buy it. So we said, you know what? Let's pull it down. Let's put it up on video. Yeah, I'm open for suggestions. We're thinking about it. I don't know if I'm just going to leave it open up and out for just for free. I'd like to have it at a place so it feels a bit better, but who knows? Maybe we just release it for free. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not an expert in this world. I just know that, you know, the entire way of distributing video content has been flipped upside down in the last, you know, everyone's cutting the cord for cable. Everyone's streaming nowadays, 2022. And it's you working at ESPN now and everything else, and having your finger on the pulse of everything. I didn't know if you had something up your sleeves. You know, maybe it's not this year, but maybe it's next year. But as you said, get those rights to your kids, because in 10 years it's going to be even different. It's going to even be different again. Tell us a little bit about the comic book, because that thing is also just very, very well done from a detail perspective and everything else. Like what made you decide to go into the comic book area? Is that just a passion project, or was there a sense that might be a good avenue to go down? Or,
well, first off, even for the animated piece, we wrote a script. We did the same idea. There's a format that we use, and there's a beginning, middle, end, a midpoint, and there's narrative beats, and we just tailored it to the length of the short. But same idea, same thing with the comic. We actually framed the comic book by using the page numbers versus the minutes of the film, because that's how you would outline the film or the short, whatever it is, by minutes or seconds of where these certain narrative beats should happen and how it works. We did the same thing by page number for the comic. And the idea of the comic was, one, it was somewhat accessible. We didn't think it would be, the barrier for entry to make a comic is not that big, right? It was way more expensive than I thought it was going to be. We hired other vets to work on it, which was great. They gave us, you know, we didn't pay them the prevailing rate across the industry, but we did pay them a decent amount of money. And we were fortunate that they would work on it, and they did it. I think it's beautiful. And I just think it's one of, again, we want to make a feature film. We want to make a series, like a HBO type series. We want to do more with it. But in the meantime, what can we do to expand the universe that has lower barriers, right? We actually worked on a video game pilot with an external partner, and we're currently still working on an off-Broadway play. We actually have a feature film script that was written by an Academy Award winner. So we've done things, but it's very hard to get things made and get traction. And the comic was just an easier way for us to do it without really relying on an external partner. We could fund it. We could do the work ourselves. The one that I sent you, Chosin to the Sea, you know, I wrote that. It was based on some ideas. I worked with Richard Meyer and some of the people on the team, the artist and whatnot. And it was this particular part. So if you see there's the Chosin documentary, there's the animated piece, which has a specific storyline at an angle. And then in this story, I took a couple of different stories of veterans. So it's all true. The comic book is a mixture of stories to create one larger true story. And a guy Jason Wan, who I worked with on the feature film, to get this script done and everything from the Academy Award winner, Frank Pearson. It was the last script he wrote before he passed away. This was a story of his father.
Wow.
So his father was in North Korea, was taken down with his grandmother. His grandmother stuffed his jacket full of money, put him on the boat, and she never left. He never saw her again. And so I wanted to tell the story of the civilians, because war doesn't just affect the two people on either side. It affects the civilians. It affects your families. And this was another way to tell the story from not just a different perspective per se, versus the good guys and the bad guys. Like, what did Clint Eastwood do? The Letters from Iwo Jima, and the other one, he did the Iwo Jima movie. There was a two-part to it. There was the Japanese side and the American side. And so this was really to honor the civilians, but then to talk about what they've gone through and what they continue to go through. So even now, the civilians in Ukraine, what they're going through, the terror, the death, the fear, the loss, and their kids. There are kids there, and there were kids here doing this thing, and there were kids that were rescued. And I just wanted to tell that story.
It feels like to me that you're meant to make a mini series documentary. Like if we're talking about 2022 with people binge watching like a whole 12 episodes to tell that individualistic story, you're the right person to do it. That has to happen. If anything out of this, I hope that I light a little bit under your butt to push you over the edge to make it happen. I feel like you're the right person. So for everyone that's listening, so we grew up in a middle of the woods, Jackson, New Jersey. Brian was a year older than me. We were lifting partners, and we had this guy, Tony Bombaci, who was the weightlifting coach. He was also the art teacher at the school. And if you ever think about like those two things are almost at opposite ends of the spectrum, and Brian was always like his star artist, and also we were always in a weight room learning from Bombac. And you've always been a crazy artist. Where did that come from?
I wish I knew, when I've been asked that question, I don't really think about it. It's just kind of something that I was drawn to. I'm a Gemini. Maybe that's, I'm I'm like half Puerto Rican, half Irish. So I'm like sort of Rican. So I don't know. I'm trying to come up with some kind of idea, but I just wake up, and I just something I've wanted to do. And, I've learned from it. Being a storyteller, I've done painting, I've done photography, and I started exploring film and video. And then I really realized that storytelling is really something I have a passion for. I love it. And you can tell a story with picture, with video and film. And that's sort of where I really gravitated to. And it's in my bones. It's in my DNA.
You brought up a story structure before, beginning, middle, and end, all those kind of things. Did you formally go through the study of story itself?
So I did go to film school at Temple. I got my undergrad there. I got my MBA at Syracuse. And when I was at Temple, I did some film writing classes, but it wasn't an intensive story. I wish I knew now what I knew then. I think it's always the case, right? I wish I knew I had all this knowledge when I was younger, because I would have been able to do more and better, and I would have like slingshotted myself forward. And as I was getting out of it, even while I was in the service, I was contacting people in the film and entertainment industry. I was stationed in California, so I'd reach out to people in LA, or I'd meet people that were covering the war. And I would meet this person. I told them I want to make movies, and then I'd connect with people. And so I would do script coverage, and then I would read screenwriting books, and then I would read story structure books. I took online seminars, and when I was driving to Syracuse every so often, I would listen to books on tape or traveling. But I always just immersed myself in the world of filmmaking and primarily storytelling, because you can have all the effects in the world, you can have all the actors in the world, and it's across. You could see it. If you don't have a good story, it's not a good movie. Period. It's not a good book. Me talking to you, if there's no story there, it's not good. It's not worth listening to. And it was just important to me. And both me and Anton, my producing partner, he's the other Marine, we did the same thing. We just immersed ourselves, and we have this language. And I remember when I was working with Frank Pearson, he wrote Cool Hand Luke, Dog Day Afternoon. He was the president of the Academy. This guy was amazing. He was also an Army vet, and it was the last script that he worked on. And I remember talking to him and having the pleasure of giving him notes, like who am I to give an Academy Award-winning writer? He was considered the greatest living writer at the time. And he was writing a script based on Chosin, which is, I mean, holy moly, what an honor. And it was so nice to be able to talk to him based on fundamentals of structure and story. Not that the ideas were wrong or bad, but we would just talk about from a narrative structural standpoint of where we want to go. And he was so receptive to it. And we had such a great rapport. And it's a certain language to talk to other creative people where it's not that I don't like what you're doing. We have to align on a certain structure in order to effectively tell a story.
What got him hooked on this story? So if he probably have his pick of many things to work on, and especially spending one of the last things you're working on in your life. Was there something that he felt there was something here that he needed to be a part of?
So really, Charlotte Huggins was our producer, and she put it all together. Eric Brevig was going to be the director. Charlotte Huggins was I guess I'd call her the executive producer, the producer. She kind of put all this together. So she's done all kinds of 3D and IMAX movies, and she was great. And I was just kind of along for the ride. It was the story of Chosin. And like you said, I was the right person. No one has the depth of knowledge. And I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of footage. I have handwritten books, handwritten notes, hand-drawn photographs. I have a treasure trove of Chosin stuff. And we've even studied books from the Chinese and movies from the Chinese and the North Koreans and the South Koreans. And I think he was also a veteran. I think that mattered. And the story just wasn't told. I think that's what he was drawn to. It was, and but even for anybody else. So imagine, right? So here, real quick story. Just think about it. It's 1950. These are kids. The wars are over. The military is now a skeleton. They never thought there'd ever be another war like that, like any big war ever. And all of a sudden, North Korea invaded South Korea. They call everybody up, and thousands and thousands of the Marines that didn't even go to boot camp. So imagine they didn't even have training. You go right into war. You start off and it's blazing hot and you're fighting your way up. And the next thing you know, it's 20, 30, 40 degrees below zero. And one night you wake up, there's flares and trumpets, and you look and there's thousands and thousands of people charging at you. And now you have to fight your way. It wasn't like you retreated. There was no retreat. When you're surrounded, you're fighting in every direction. Then fighting their way out, doing everything they could to carry their dead and wounded. They didn't leave anyone behind unless they were lost, right? And then on the way out, they rescued about 100,000 civilians. Just that story alone, it's absolutely improbable. It's unbelievable, and it shows the triumph of the human spirit. When we released the film, it was the 50th anniversary of the Korean War. No, or 60th anniversary. I'm sorry, it was the 60th anniversary of the Korean War, right? 60th anniversary, 2010, 60th anniversary. Guess how many films came out for the 60th anniversary of the Korean War?
Yours, maybe?
One. Ours. I don't understand why more people haven't been drawn to this, why they haven't made the movie. It's just, it's an amazing story.
Even if it was just the story being great, and we separate out the moral and right thing to do, and by remembering all of the hard sacrifices that were done, if you separate them and compartmentalize them and just say, just the story alone is intriguing enough. That's why, I could imagine you writing a 4-season series telling the human side of this and painting all kinds of great pictures on it. So, it's 2022, probably still got 50 years left in you. You never know. This has been a fantastic conversation. I don't think there's actually a single edit I'm even going to need to make on this, which has been fantastic.
That's good. That's good.
No mic drops, no prolonged.
Maybe you can give me some bigger muscles so I look like I'm,
There we go. Let's get back in.
I know.
Let's get back with Water Buffaloes.
I need to.
So let's just cap off where can people find everything to get more if they're interested in this story, and what can they do to get more for this?
So the film is on Amazon Prime. You can buy it there. I think you can even rent it there. It's cheap. We made it as cheap as possible, so it's like break even. It's a couple of bucks. We're not trying to juice anybody on it, right? It's a very low cost purchase. You can get the animated short. It's called Chosin, Baptized by Fire. That's it. Google it, or you can put it in a link somewhere. It's very easy. It's free. And just so you know, we purposefully didn't monetize any of our videos. We didn't put monetization on the Chosin trailer or the animated short. 2.4 million views, not a single advertisement. Just watch it. I don't want any barrier to entry. I don't want anyone to click off nope. We don't monetize any of this stuff. We just want it to be for free. And the comic, if you want to share the link of the PDF, you can feel free to do that, John. Let people read it. It's okay. We had it in publication. It's expensive to make it. It's expensive to distribute it. We did have it in some comic stores. We sold out. And then we just, have a digital copy. So I'm happy for you to give that away to your
Fantastic.
listeners.
I'll put the links in the YouTube comments for everything that you just mentioned. And this has just been a pleasure for the audience. What I'm trying to do with this show is really get people to think longer term, things that are going to outlast themselves. Maybe it's because I'm getting older and I know that I'm not going to be here forever, but that's been my push on this. I don't think a lot of people think really long term, and Brian popped into my mind, and it's just been great to just reconnect after 20 some odd years, and just so proud of everything that you've accomplished, man. And thank you for everything, and thank you for spending the time with us today.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. It was great. Anytime.